The knock came just after sunset, when Nathan Irving was considering whether to make himself another pot of coffee or just head to bed and let the loneliness of another day fade into dreams. He set down the mug he had been turning over in his hands and walked to the door of his ranch house, boots echoing on the wooden floor in the silence that had become his constant companion since his father passed 2 years ago. When he opened it, he found a woman standing there with dust covering her worn traveling dress, her dark hair escaping from beneath a simple bonnet, and exhaustion written across features that were nevertheless striking in the orange glow of the Colorado twilight. "I am sorry to bother you so late," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that might have been from cold or nerves or both. "My wagon lost a wheel about 3 miles back on the road to Central City. I have been walking since mid-afternoon, and I saw your lights. I can pay for some supplies, just enough to get me through until I can reach town tomorrow. Some water, maybe some bread if you have it." Nathan found himself staring for a moment before remembering his manners. The year was 1873, and out here in the Colorado Territory, a woman traveling alone was not exactly common but not unheard of either, especially with the silver mines bringing all sorts of people west with dreams of fortune or fresh starts. He noticed her hands trembling slightly as she reached into a small purse hanging from her belt. "No need for that," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended after a day of speaking to no one but his horses. "Come inside. I will get you whatever you need." She hesitated, and he saw the wariness in her eyes. Smart woman, he thought. Out here you could not be too careful, especially not with strangers. "I promise you are safe here," he added quietly. "I am just a rancher, and I have not had company in longer than I care to admit. If you are uncomfortable coming inside, I can bring supplies out to you. But it is getting cold, and you look like you could use a hot meal." The woman studied his face for a long moment, and Nathan wondered what she saw there. He was 32 years old, tall and lean from hard work, with brown hair that needed cutting and eyes that his mother used to say were too serious for a young man. He had spent most of his adult life on this ranch, first helping his father build it up, then running it alone after the fever took his parents within a week of each other. He supposed he looked as lonely as he felt. "My name is Grace Zimmerman," she said finally, and something in her posture relaxed just slightly. "And I confess I am too tired to be as cautious as I should be. If you are offering kindness, I am grateful to accept it." He stepped back and gestured her inside. "Nathan Irving. This is the Double I Ranch, about 7 miles outside Central City. We raise horses mostly, some cattle. It is not much, but it is honest work." Grace entered slowly, her eyes adjusting to the lamplight inside. The interior of the ranch house was clean but sparse, with the kind of functionality that spoke of a man living alone. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a fire burning low in the grate. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and there were no decorative touches save for a painting above the mantel that showed a younger Nathan standing with a man and woman who shared his features. "Your parents?" Grace asked, nodding toward the painting. "Yes. They started this place 20 years ago when there was nothing out here but prairie and hope. They both passed 2 years back." He moved toward the kitchen area, pulling out a chair at the rough-hewn table. "Please sit. You must be exhausted." Grace sank into the chair with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Now that she was in better light, Nathan could see she was probably in her late 20s, with brown eyes that held both intelligence and sadness. Her dress, though dusty and worn from travel, had been well made once, and she carried herself with a sort of quiet dignity that spoke of better circumstances in her past. "I am sorry for your loss," she said softly, Losing both parents must have been terrible. Nathan busied himself at the stove, where a pot of stew had been simmering. It was, but I still have the ranch and their dream. Some days that feels like enough. He did not mention that other days the silence pressed in like a physical weight, or that he sometimes went weeks without seeing another soul, except when he made his monthly trip to town for supplies. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and while the ranch hands came during branding and roundup season, most of the year it was just him and the horses and the endless Colorado sky. He ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her along with thick slices of bread and butter. Grace stared at the food for a moment, and he saw her eyes glisten with tears before she blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much I needed this." "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, pouring her water and then coffee. "Yesterday morning. I had some provisions in the wagon, but when the wheel broke, the horse spooked and ran off with most of my things still attached. I managed to grab my bag, but not much else." She picked up the spoon and took a bite, closing her eyes as if the simple stew was the finest meal she had ever tasted. "This is wonderful." Nathan poured himself coffee and sat across from her, trying not to stare but finding it difficult to look away. It had been so long since he had shared a meal with anyone, longer still since that person had been a woman. The ranch hands were good men but rough company, and his trips to town were usually hurried affairs where he got his supplies and left before the noise and crowds became overwhelming after so much solitude. "Where were you heading?" he asked. "If you do not mind me asking." Grace swallowed and took a sip of water before answering. "Central City. I have a cousin there who runs a boarding house. She wrote to me 6 months ago saying she could use help and that there might be teaching work available as well. I taught at a small school back in Kansas before." She trailed off, her expression clouding. "Before what?" The question came out before Nathan could stop himself. "I am sorry, that is none of my business." "No, it is all right." Grace set down her spoon and wrapped her hands around the coffee mug as if drawing warmth from it. "Before my husband died. Thomas was a farmer. We had a small place outside Lawrence. 3 years ago there was a drought, then the grasshoppers came. By the time Thomas died last winter, we had lost everything. The bank took the farm and I had nothing left but what I could carry." "I am sorry," Nathan said and meant it. He had heard similar stories before. The West was full of people running from loss or toward hope, often both at the same time. "It has been hard," Grace admitted, "but I am trying to build something new." My cousin's letter felt like providence, like maybe God was giving me a second chance. I sold what little I had left and bought passage on a train to Denver, then bought that wagon and horse with the last of my money to make it the rest of the way to Central City. And now here I am, wagon broken, horse gone, sitting in a stranger's house and accepting his charity. There was bitterness in her voice at the end, and Nathan recognized the pride of someone who was not used to needing help. He understood that feeling all too well. "It is not charity," he said firmly. "Out here we help each other. That is how people survive. Tomorrow I will ride out with you to your wagon, see if we can salvage it. If not, I will take you into Central City myself. Consider it neighborly assistance." Grace looked at him with something like wonder. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me at all." Nathan considered the question. The truth was complicated. Yes, it was the right thing to do, the decent thing, but there was more to it than that. From the moment he had opened the door and seen her standing there, something in his chest had tightened in a way he had not felt in years, maybe ever. She looked lost and determined at the same time, vulnerable but not broken, and something in him responded to that on a level he did not quite understand yet. "Because I know what it is like to be alone," he said finally. and because kindness should not need a reason. They fell into silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft clink of Grace's spoon against the bowl. Nathan watched her eat, noticing the delicate way she moved despite her obvious hunger, the straight line of her back even in exhaustion. "You said you were a teacher," he asked, wanting to hear her voice again. Grace nodded, finishing the last of her stew. "For 5 years. I loved it, working with the children, seeing them learn and grow. It was the one thing I missed most after Thomas and I married. He needed help with the farm, and there was no school nearby anyway. But I have been hoping I might find a position in Central City. My cousin said they are looking for teachers, with all the mining families settling in the area." "You would be good at it," Nathan said. "I can tell." "How can you possibly know that?" Grace asked, but she was almost smiling now, the first hint of lightness crossing her features. "You have a patient way about you, and you explain things clearly. Those seem like good qualities for a teacher." Grace did smile then, and Nathan felt something warm unfold in his chest. "That is very kind of you to say, though you are basing this on approximately 15 minutes of acquaintance." "Sometimes 15 minutes is enough to take the measure of a person," Nathan replied. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Nathan felt the weight of loneliness that had been his companion for 2 years suddenly feel a little lighter, as if Grace's presence had shifted something fundamental in the air of the house. Grace looked away first, color rising in her cheeks. "I should not keep you up so late. You have been more than generous already. If you have a barn or somewhere I could sleep for the night, I will be out of your way at first light." "Absolutely not," Nathan said, more forcefully than he intended. "I will not have you sleeping in the barn like livestock. There is a spare bedroom upstairs that was my mother's sewing room. It has a proper bed and everything you need. You will stay there. I could not impose. You are not imposing. I am offering." Nathan stood and began gathering the dishes. "Actually, I would like to ask something in return if you are willing." Grace tensed slightly. "What is that? Your company? Just for this evening?" The words came out in a rush, and Nathan felt his own face heat. "I know that must sound strange, but I have not had anyone to talk to in so long. If you are not too tired, I would appreciate the conversation. That would be payment enough for the supplies and the room." Grace studied him again with those intelligent eyes, and Nathan held his breath, half expecting her to refuse, to see the request as improper or his intentions as suspect. But instead her expression softened. "I would like that," she said quietly. "I have not had much company myself lately. It has been a lonely road." Relief flooded through Nathan. "Good. Let me clean these up and then we can sit by the fire. It is more comfortable there." He made quick work of the dishes while Grace looked around the main room, pausing to examine the books on a shelf near the fireplace. By the time Nathan joined her, she had pulled one down and was reading The Spine. "Shakespeare," she said with surprise. "I would not have expected to find this out here. My mother was educated back east," Nathan explained, settling into one of the worn armchairs flanking the fire. "She insisted on bringing her books when they came west. Said she was not going to let civilization slip away just because they were building something new. She taught me to read from those books." Grace opened the volume, carefully turning the pages. "The Tempest. This was always one of my favorites. The idea of starting over on an island, building a new world from nothing. Is that what you are doing? Starting over, trying to?" Grace replaced the book carefully and took the other chair, angling it slightly toward him. "It is harder than I imagined. After Thomas died, I felt so lost. The farm was gone, our friends had their own troubles, and I did not know who I was anymore without him. Coming west felt like the only option, the only way to find out if there was still a Grace underneath all that grief." "Have you found her?" Nathan asked softly. Grace was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I think I am beginning to. Some days are easier than others. Today was hard when the wagon broke and I thought I might have to spend the night alone on the road. But then I found your lights, and here I am, warm and fed and safe. Maybe that is what starting over is, a series of small salvations until you are someone new. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. My mother used to say something similar. After they lost their first house to a fire, she said they just had to begin again, one nail and one board at a time, until they had built something even better than before. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Stubborn too. My father always said that was what kept them alive out here when so many others gave up and went back east. Nathan smiled at the memory. She refused to let the hardness of this place make her hard. She kept her books and her music and made sure there were flowers around the house every summer. She said beauty was not a luxury but a necessity. Grace looked around the room again, and Nathan saw it through her eyes, the stark functionality, the absence of softness or decoration. You have not kept up with the flowers. No, he admitted. After they died, it felt wrong somehow. Like I would be pretending everything was fine when it was not. And then time just passed, and I got used to things being the way they were. That is the danger of grief, Grace said. It becomes comfortable in its own terrible way, familiar. Letting it go feels like betraying the people we lost. Did you feel that way about your husband? I still do, sometimes. Thomas was a good man. He deserved better than what life gave him. Better than the drought and the grasshoppers and the slow, grinding poverty that killed him as surely as any disease. When I decided to come west, I felt guilty, like I was abandoning him. Grace's voice caught, and she cleared her throat. But I also knew he would not have wanted me to bury myself with him. He always said I had too much life in me to waste it. Nathan watched the firelight play across her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the determined set of her jaw. He was right about that. Grace turned to look at him, and their eyes caught and held. You are very easy to talk to, Nathan Irving. I have not spoken this openly with anyone since Thomas died. Most people do not want to hear about grief. It makes them uncomfortable. Grief should not be hidden away, Nathan said. It is part of living, part of loving. My father carried his grief for the son they lost before I was born until the day he died. My mother taught me it was nothing to be ashamed of. Your mother sounds more remarkable the more you talk about her. She was. I wish you could have met her. I think she would have liked you. The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than Nathan had intended. Grace did not respond immediately, but something in her expression shifted, a softening around her eyes. Tell me about the ranch, she said, seeming to sense the need to shift to safer ground. How do you manage it all by yourself? Nathan settled back in his chair, grateful for the change of subject even as part of him wanted to continue the deeper conversation. It is not easy, especially during foaling season or when I need to break the new horses. I hire hands when I need them, but mostly I can handle the day-to-day work myself. We have about 40 horses right now, good stock that I sell to the army and to ranchers in the area. Some cattle too, maybe 50 head, just enough to keep me in beef and bring in a little extra money. That sounds like a lot for one person. It is, but the work keeps me from thinking too much. Nathan paused. That probably sounds strange. Not at all. After Thomas died, I cleaned that farmhouse until there was nothing left to clean. I understood the appeal of exhaustion. Grace pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. What will you do? Keep running the ranch alone? It was the question Nathan had been avoiding for 2 years, the one that crept up on him during the long evenings and the empty mornings. I do not know. This place was my parents' dream, and I want to honor that. but sometimes I wonder if I am living or just existing, going through the motions because I do not know what else to do." "That is honest," Grace said. "Maybe too honest for someone I just met." "No," Grace shook her head. "I asked you before why you were being so kind to me, and you said because you know what it is like to be alone. I think maybe we are both looking for the same thing, someone who understands." Nathan felt his heart beat faster. "Maybe we are." They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easier than Nathan would have thought possible with someone he had known for mere hours. Grace told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about becoming a teacher at 19 and meeting Thomas at 22, about the early years of their marriage when everything seemed possible. Nathan shared stories about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the dreams he had once had of seeing the ocean before his parents got sick, and the ranch became his entire world. At some point, Grace's eyes began to droop despite her obvious effort to stay awake. Nathan noticed and stood quickly. "I am keeping you up when you should be resting. Come on, let me show you to the room." He led her upstairs, carrying a lamp to light the way. The house was simple, just 4 rooms on the upper floor. He stopped at the second door and pushed it open, revealing a small but comfortable space with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern range. "There are quilts in the chest if you get cold," Nathan said, setting the lamp on the bedside table. "And water in the pitcher. If you need anything else, my room is just across the hall." Grace stepped into the room and turned to face him. In the lamplight, with her hair falling loose around her shoulders where it had escaped its pins, she looked younger, almost vulnerable. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I came here asking to buy supplies and you gave me so much more. I will not forget your kindness." Nathan found himself wanting to reach out and touch her hand, to make some kind of contact that would confirm this evening had been real and not just a dream conjured by loneliness. But he held back, keeping a respectful distance. "You are welcome. And Grace, I know you are planning to go to Central City tomorrow, to your cousin and your new life. But if you ever need anything, if things do not work out the way you hope, this place will always be open to you. I want you to know that." Something flickered across Grace's face, surprise, pleasure, maybe a hint of the same longing Nathan felt. "That is a generous offer. It is a genuine one. I do not say things I do not mean." "I can tell." Grace smiled, tired but real. "Good night, Nathan. Thank you again for your company." "It has been a gift." "The gift was yours," Nathan said quietly. "Sleep well." He forced himself to step back and close the door, then stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the soft sounds of Grace moving around the room. Finally, he made himself walk to his own room, though he knew sleep would be a long time coming. Nathan lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. In the space of a few hours, his carefully constructed solitude had been shattered, and now he could not imagine going back to the silence. Grace's presence had reminded him of everything he had been missing. Everything he had told himself did not matter because wanting it hurt too much. He thought about her smile, the way she had looked at him across the fire, the intelligence in her eyes and the sadness that matched his own. He thought about her husband, dead less than a year, and wondered if it was wrong to feel this pull toward her so soon. But grief had its own timeline, he knew that, and loneliness could be its own kind of death if you let it go on too long. Across the hall, Grace was also awake, staring at shadows on the ceiling and thinking about the man who had opened his door and his home to a stranger. She had been wary at first, trained by experience and circumstance to be careful around men she did not know. But Nathan's eyes had been kind, his manner gentle, and something in her had recognized a fellow wounded soul. She thought about his offer, that this place would always be open to her. It had been so long since anyone had offered her refuge without expecting something in return. Her cousin's invitation to Central City had been practical, born of need on both sides. But Nathan had asked for nothing but her company, had seemed to value her conversation as much as she had valued his food and shelter. Grace closed her eyes and tried to picture her future in Central City. She would help her cousin with the boarding house, look for teaching work, build a new life among strangers. It was what she had planned, what she had traveled hundreds of miles to achieve. But now, in the quiet of this room, she found herself thinking about a different possibility, about lamplight and firelight, about a voice that sounded like home. Morning came too soon. Nathan was up before dawn as always, moving quietly so as not to wake Grace. He built up the fire, started coffee, and went out to tend to the horses. The work was familiar and soothing, and he needed the time to collect his thoughts before facing Grace again in the clear light of day. The sun was just breaking over the mountains when he came back inside to find Grace already awake and sitting at the table, her hair neatly pinned and her dress brushed clean of yesterday's dust. She looked up when he entered, and Nathan saw uncertainty in her expression. "Good morning," she said. "I hope I did not oversleep." "Not at all. I am usually up early for the animals." Nathan poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them to the table. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months. That bed was wonderfully comfortable." Grace accepted the coffee gratefully. "I keep thinking I should feel awkward this morning, but somehow I do not. Is that strange? If it is, then we are both strange." Nathan sat across from her. "I have been thinking about your situation. Before we ride out to check on your wagon, I want you to know my offer from last night stands. If you want to stay here for a few days, rest and recover from your journey, you are welcome to. I know you are eager to get to your cousin, but another day or two would not make that much difference, would it?" Grace's hands tightened around her mug. "Nathan, you have already done so much." "I am not offering out of obligation. I am offering because I would like you to stay. Because yesterday evening was the first time in 2 years I have not felt completely alone in this house, and I am not ready for that feeling to end yet." Nathan took a breath, surprised by his own boldness. "I know that is selfish. I know you have your own plans and your own life to build, but I am asking anyway." Grace stared at him, and Nathan could see the conflict playing across her face. "My cousin is expecting me. Does she know exactly when you are arriving?" "No. I told her it would be sometime this week, depending on travel." "Then stay, just for a day or two. Let me show you the ranch, give you time to rest properly. If your wagon can be fixed, I will fix it. If not, I will drive you to Central City myself when you are ready to go. But give us both a little more time." The silence stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility. Nathan waited, barely breathing, aware that he was asking for something that went beyond simple hospitality. He was asking Grace to take a chance on a stranger, to delay her plans, to consider that maybe the knock on his door last night had been something more than accident. "All right," Grace said finally. "I will stay for 2 days, but then I have to go to Central City. I have to try to build the life I came out here for." Relief washed through Nathan so strongly he felt almost dizzy. "2 days, thank you. Do not thank me yet. You might regret having a house guest disrupting your routine." "I doubt that very much." They ate breakfast together, eggs and bacon and bread, and then Nathan saddled 2 horses and helped Grace mount. She was not an experienced rider, she admitted, but she knew the basics from her time on the farm. They rode out across the ranch, Nathan pointing out landmarks and boundaries, while Grace took in the sweep of the Colorado landscape with obvious appreciation. The wagon was where Grace had left it, listing to one side with the broken wheel lying nearby. Nathan inspected the damage and shook his head. The axle is cracked too. I can fix it, but it will take some work. He looked around at the scattered supplies. Your horse did not go far. I can see tracks leading east. He probably headed back toward the road looking for other travelers. We might be able to find him. They spent the morning following the tracks, eventually coming across the horse grazing peacefully in a meadow about 2 miles away. The animal was skittish but not wild, and Nathan was able to catch him with patience and a gentle hand. By the time they led the horse back to the ranch, it was past noon. You are good with animals, Grace observed, watching Nathan settle the horse in the barn. He calmed down the moment you touched him. Horses are easier than people, Nathan said. They are honest about what they want and what they fear. No pretense. Is that why you became a rancher? Because animals are easier? Nathan paused in rubbing down the horse. Maybe partly, but also because this land gets into your blood. My parents loved this place, loved the freedom and the possibility of it. I grew up thinking there was nowhere else in the world I would rather be. After they died, keeping the ranch going felt like keeping them alive somehow. Grace leaned against the stall door, her expression thoughtful. You mentioned yesterday that sometimes you wonder if you are living or just existing. Do you think they would want that for you? This half-life, the question stung because it was fair. No. My mother especially would have hated seeing me like this. She used to say that surviving was not the same as thriving, and we should always strive for the latter. Then maybe it is time to start thriving again. Maybe it is. Maybe that is why you knocked on my door last night. Their eyes met over the horse's back, and Nathan saw color rise in Grace's cheeks. She looked away first, but she was smiling. They spent the afternoon working on the wagon. Nathan showed Grace how the wheel had broken and what needed to be done to fix it, and she insisted on helping despite his protests. They worked side by side, talking occasionally but often in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes between people who are at ease with each other. Tell me about teaching, Nathan said as he fitted a new spoke into place. What made you want to do it? Grace held the wheel steady while he worked. I loved learning when I was young, and I had a teacher who made me believe I could do anything I wanted, even though I was just a girl from a small town. I wanted to be that for other children, to show them that education could open doors, give them choices. She paused. It sounds idealistic, I suppose. It sounds like it matters to you. That is not the same thing as idealistic. Thomas used to say I cared too much about things, that I should focus on the practical instead of the possible. Nathan looked up at her. Do you think that is true? I think he was scared. Scared of losing the farm, scared of what would happen to us if we failed. The worry consumed him, made him forget how to dream. By the end, he was just trying to hold on to what little we had. Grace's voice grew soft. I watched him shrink under the weight of it all, and I could not help him. I tried, but nothing I did was enough. That was not your fault, Nathan said firmly. Sometimes the world just grinds people down, no matter how hard they fight or how much the people who love them try to help. You cannot blame yourself for that. My head knows that. My heart is still learning it. They finished with the wagon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Nathan declared the repair good enough for the journey to Central City, though he would need to do more work to make it truly sound. Grace looked at the wagon with mixed emotions. Part of me does not want it fixed, she admitted. Is that terrible? No, I understand. That evening, Grace insisted on cooking dinner as a way to contribute. Nathan watched her move around the kitchen, marveling at how quickly his space had come to feel like their space, how natural it seemed to have her there. She made a simple meal of chicken and vegetables, but she did it with a care that elevated it beyond mere sustenance. This is delicious, Nathan said after the first bite. "You are a wonderful cook. Thomas always said cooking was my best quality." Grace spoke matter-of-factly, but Nathan heard the hurt underneath. Thomas was wrong. Or maybe he just never took the time to see all your qualities. Nathan set down his fork. "In one day, I can already see that you are intelligent, kind, resilient, and yes, a good cook. But the cooking is probably fifth or sixth on the list of things that make you remarkable." Grace's eyes widened. "That is quite a compliment from someone who has known me less than 24 hours. Does that make it less true?" "No." Grace looked down at her plate. "It makes it almost overwhelming. I am not used to being seen that way. Maybe you should be." After dinner, they returned to the chairs by the fire. The evening passed much like the previous one, with conversation that ranged from serious to lighthearted, touching on everything from books to philosophy to the practical challenges of life in Colorado. Nathan found himself telling Grace things he had never articulated to anyone, dreams he had set aside, fears he had never named. "When I was younger, I wanted to breed horses that would be known all across the West," he said. "Not just good horses, but exceptional ones. Horses that would carry their riders safely and swiftly no matter the terrain. I wanted the Irving name to mean something in the horse world." "That is still possible," Grace said. "You are only 32, you have time. It takes more than time. It takes passion and focus and a reason to care about leaving a legacy. For the last 2 years, I have been going through the motions, breeding horses that are good enough but not great, selling them quick instead of taking the time to find the right buyers, existing instead of building." Grace leaned forward. "Then stop existing, start building again. It sounds simple when you say it like that. It is not simple at all, starting over never is, but it is possible. I am proof of that. 2 months ago, I was in Kansas with nothing and no hope. Now I am in Colorado, sitting in a warm house with a good man, and I actually believe I might have a future worth living." She smiled. "If I can do it, so can you." Nathan felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening onto a room he had kept locked. "Stay longer." "What?" "Stay longer than 2 days. Stay a week or 2 weeks or however long you need. Help me figure out how to start building again. Let me help you do the same." The words were tumbling out now, driven by an urgency Nathan had not known he possessed. "I know it is too soon. I know you have your plans and your cousin in Central City. But Grace, from the moment you knocked on that door, everything has felt different, clearer. Like I was sleepwalking for 2 years and suddenly I am awake again." Grace was staring at him, her expression unreadable. "Nathan, I am not asking for anything improper," he said quickly. "You would have your own room, your own space. I just want more time. Time to see if what I am feeling is real or just loneliness playing tricks on me. Time for you to rest and recover and figure out what you want without pressure. Time for us to get to know each other beyond these 2 evenings. You are feeling something." Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan took a breath and decided to risk complete honesty. "From the first moment, yes. I cannot explain it, but seeing you standing at my door felt like an answer to a question I had not known how to ask. And I know that sounds insane, and I know we are both carrying grief and that complicates things. But I also know that life is short and chances like this do not come along often." He paused. "Am I completely alone in this, or do you feel it too?" The silence that followed was the longest of Nathan's life. Grace sat very still, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice shook slightly. "I feel it. God help me, I have felt it since you opened the door, and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because Thomas has only been gone 8 months. Because I am supposed to be building a new life in Central City. Because I do not trust my own judgment anymore. Because what if this is just two lonely people grasping at each other in the dark? Grace looked at him then, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. What if we are making a terrible mistake? What if we are not? Nathan rose and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. What if this is exactly what we are supposed to be doing? What if you knocked on my door for a reason beyond coincidence? I do not believe in fate. Neither did I until yesterday. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I am not asking you to marry me or pledge your life or anything that permanent. I am just asking you to stay a little longer, to give this whatever this is a chance to become whatever it is supposed to be. Grace looked down at their joined hands. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. At the end of that time, if you want to go to Central City, I will take you there myself and wish you every happiness. But if you want to stay longer, you can do that too. No pressure, no expectations beyond honest companionship. You make it sound so reasonable. Is it not? No. Grace laughed, a slightly shaky sound. It is reckless and impulsive and nothing like the careful person I have always tried to be, which is why I am going to say yes. Joy flooded through Nathan so suddenly and completely that he squeezed her hand without thinking. Really, really. 2 weeks. But Nathan, I need you to understand something. I am not the same person I was before Thomas died. Grief has changed me. I am harder in some ways, more fragile in others. I do not know if I am capable of being what you might want me to be. I do not have expectations of who you should be, Nathan said. I just want to know who you are. Grace smiled through the tears that were now falling freely. That might be the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Nathan reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture tender and careful. You deserve kindness, Grace. I hope these next 2 weeks help you remember that. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped and eyes locked, both of them aware that they had just stepped off a cliff together and were either going to fly or fall. Finally, Grace squeezed his hand and gently pulled back. I should write to my cousin. Let her know I will be delayed. We can take the letter to town tomorrow if you like. I need to pick up some supplies anyway. That would be good. Grace stood and Nathan rose with her. Thank you, Nathan, for your patience and your honesty. I promise I will try to be worthy of both. You already are. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Nathan woke earlier than usual, too energized to sleep, and spent an extra hour in the barn making sure everything was perfect before going inside to find Grace already up and making breakfast. I hope you do not mind, she said, flipping pancakes on the griddle. I am used to early mornings and I want it to be useful. I will never complain about pancakes, Nathan said, inhaling the smell of coffee and batter and something sweet that might have been berries. Where did you find berries? The preserves in your pantry. Your mother made them, I assume. A pang of bittersweet nostalgia hit Nathan. Yes, she always put up preserves in the summer. I have been rationing them because when they are gone, that is one more piece of her that is gone too. Grace turned to look at him, spatula in hand. I should not have used them without asking. I am sorry. No, do not be. She would want them to be enjoyed, not hoarded out of sentiment. She used to say that food was meant to bring people together, and preserves that sit in jars forever do not fulfill that purpose. Nathan smiled. Besides, sharing them with you feels right somehow. They ate breakfast together, making plans for the day. After breakfast, they rode to Central City, which proved to be a bustling mining town in the throes of transformation. The main street was crowded with prospectors, merchants, and families, all drawn by the promise of silver in the mountains. The noise and activity were a stark contrast to the quiet of the ranch. Grace mailed her letter while Nathan gathered supplies. They met back at the wagon, and Nathan suggested showing her around town properly before heading back. "There is a bookstore," he said, watching her face light up. "I thought you might enjoy it." They spent an hour browsing the shelves, discussing favorites and arguing amicably about the merits of various authors. Nathan bought her a copy of Jane Eyre that she had mentioned wanting to read again, and Grace protested but accepted the gift with obvious pleasure. On the ride back to the ranch, Grace was quieter than usual. Nathan glanced over at her several times, concerned. "Are you having second thoughts?" he asked finally. "No, just thinking about how different today is from what I expected my life to look like." Grace adjusted her grip on the reins. "A week ago I was alone and frightened and certain I would spend the rest of my life that way. Now I am here with you and it feels almost too good to be real. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing has to go wrong. In my experience, good things do not last." Nathan understood that cynicism born of loss. "I cannot promise you that everything will work out the way we hope, but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to make sure the next 2 weeks are good ones. After that, we will figure out the rest together if you want to." "If I want to," Grace repeated softly. "Yes, I think I do." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, as if they were creating something unique while also tapping into a pattern as old as human companionship. Nathan taught Grace about the ranch, showing her how to care for the horses, how to mend fences, how to read the weather in the mountain clouds. Grace brought a different kind of knowledge, teaching him songs his mother had sung, reading aloud to him in the evenings, making the house feel like a home again with small touches like wildflowers in jars and curtains tied back to let in more light. They talked constantly, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Nathan learned that Grace had always wanted children but had never conceived during her marriage, and that the absence of that hoped-for family had been another grief layered atop all the others. Grace learned that Nathan had once been engaged to a woman in Denver who had ultimately decided she could not handle the isolation of ranch life, and that her departure had reinforced his belief that he was meant to be alone. She was not wrong, Nathan admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. The isolation is real. Some people thrive in it, but others find it suffocating. You have to be a certain kind of person to build a life out here. "What kind of person is that?" Grace asked. "Someone who finds peace in silence. Someone who does not need constant stimulation or society. Someone who can look at empty land and see possibility instead of absence." "You just described me," Grace said quietly. "After Thomas died and the farm was sold, I lived in a boarding house in town for a month while I arranged to come west. I thought I would enjoy being around people again after years of isolation on the farm. But I hated it. All the noise and the crowds and the constant demands for small talk. I felt like I could not breathe. Out here I can breathe again." Nathan turned to look at her, his heart beating faster. "You could stay, you know, not just for 2 weeks. You could actually stay." Grace met his eyes. "Is that what you want?" "Yes. More than I have wanted anything in a very long time. We have only known each other a week." "Does that matter?" Grace considered this. "I suppose not. I knew Thomas for 3 months before we married, and everyone said that was long enough. Time is relative. Sometimes you know someone for years and never truly know them. Sometimes a week is enough to see into someone's soul." "Have you seen into mine?" Nathan asked. "I think so. I see loneliness and longing and a deep capacity for loyalty. I see someone who has forgotten how to hope, but wants desperately to remember. I see a man who could be an extraordinary partner if he let himself believe he was worthy of love." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow, stripping away defenses he had not known he had raised. And what do you see when you look at yourself? Grace was quiet for a long time. I am still learning, but I think I see someone stronger than I believed, someone who has survived things that should have broken her. Someone who is maybe ready to take another chance on happiness, even though she knows firsthand how quickly it can be snatched away. Grace. Nathan reached for her hand, and she let him take it. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life is unpredictable, and we have both learned that the hard way. But I can promise that whatever comes, we would face it together. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Grace whispered. Nathan, I think I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and fierce and undeniable. Nathan felt something in his chest expand, like his heart was suddenly too big for his ribs. I know I am falling in love with you, he said. I think I started the moment you knocked on my door. They moved toward each other simultaneously, meeting in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper, full of all the longing and loneliness they had both carried for so long. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Stay, Nathan said against her lips. Not for 2 weeks. Stay permanently. Marry me. Build a life here with me. Help me make this ranch everything it could be. Help me remember how to thrive instead of just survive. Grace pulled back just enough to see his face clearly. That is a lot to ask, I know, but I am asking anyway. What about my teaching? I did not come all this way just to give up on that dream. Then do not give it up. Central City needs a teacher, you said so yourself. You could apply for a position, make the ride into town every day during the school year. Or we could start a small school here, for the ranch families in the area. There are ways to have both. Nathan cupped her face in his hands. I am not asking you to sacrifice your dreams for mine. I am asking if we can build something together that honors both. Tears streamed down Grace's face, but she was smiling. You make it sound so possible. It is possible. We can make it possible. I want to say yes. I want to so badly. But Nathan, what if I cannot have children? What if that is just not something my body can do? I know you must want a family. I want you, Nathan said firmly. Children would be wonderful if they happen, but they are not the price of admission to my heart. You are enough, Grace. Just you, exactly as you are. Grace let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. How are you real? I've been asking myself the same thing about you for a week. They kissed again, longer this time with a certainty that had been missing before. When they finally separated, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He asked. That is a yes to staying. The marriage part, I need a little more time to wrap my head around. Can we take this one step at a time? We can take it any way you want. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. The second week passed in a blur of happiness that both of them were almost afraid to trust. Grace wrote to her cousin explaining that her plans had changed, that she had found unexpected opportunities in the area, and would not be coming to Central City after all. The cousin wrote back with congratulations and understanding, having herself found love in unexpected circumstances. Nathan began working on the ranch with renewed energy, talking to Grace about his plans for breeding better horses, for expanding the herd, for making the Double I Ranch something that would outlast both of them. Grace threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch management, discovering that she had a natural aptitude for the business side of operations. She also rode into Central City twice to inquire about teaching positions, and was offered a job starting in the fall. They moved through the days in harmony, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. Nathan discovered that Grace sang while she worked, that she was impossibly stubborn about things that mattered to her and completely flexible about things that did not, that she had a sharp wit that could make him laugh even when he was frustrated. Grace learned that Nathan was patient to a fault, that he thought best early in the morning with coffee in hand, that he had a deep well of kindness that extended to every living thing on the ranch. One evening 3 weeks after Grace had first knocked on Nathan's door, they were sitting on the porch after dinner when Grace turned to him with determination in her eyes. "Ask me again," she said. "Ask you what?" "You know what?" Nathan's heart began to pound. "Grace Zimmerman, will you marry me?" "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Nathan Irving." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she gasped. "When? Soon. I do not want to wait. We have both waited long enough for happiness, do not you think?" "I do." "Next week. We could go into town, find the preacher, make it legal." Grace laughed, the sound free and joyful. "Next week sounds perfect." They were married on a warm September morning in 1873, in a small church in Central City, with a handful of witnesses, including Grace's cousin and a few of Nathan's neighbors. Grace wore a simple cream-colored dress that the cousin had helped her sew, and Nathan wore his best suit, the one his mother had made him promise to save for important occasions. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed his bride with a tenderness that made more than one witness wipe away tears. The ride back to the ranch felt different this time, weighted with the significance of what they had just done. Grace was no longer a guest or even a companion. She was Nathan's wife, and the Double I Ranch was officially her home. That night, they came together as husband and wife with a mixture of nervousness and eagerness. Both had been married before, but this felt new, like they were discovering something together for the first time. Nathan was gentle and patient, and Grace responded with a passion that surprised them both. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Grace traced patterns on Nathan's chest and smiled. "I never thought I would feel this again," she said. "This kind of joy, this kind of connection." "Neither did I. I had convinced myself that I was content with my solitary life." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for knocking on my door. Thank you for opening it." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. There were disagreements about how to run the ranch, about money, about the division of labor. There were moments when Grace mourned the life she had left behind in Kansas, and moments when Nathan worried that he had been selfish to ask her to stay. But beneath all the normal friction of two people learning to share a life, there was a foundation of love and respect that sustained them through the difficult moments. Grace started teaching at the Central City School in October, making the ride into town 3 days a week. She loved the work, loved seeing the children's faces light up when they mastered a new concept. Nathan supported her fully, adjusting his schedule to accommodate hers, never making her feel guilty for pursuing her own dreams alongside their shared ones. In the spring, they bred their first exceptional horse, a foal with lines so clean and movement so graceful that buyers began circling before it was even weaned. Nathan credited Grace with pushing him to take risks in his breeding program, to trust his instincts instead of playing it safe. By summer, the Double I Ranch was developing a reputation in Colorado territory for producing exceptional horses. 2 years into their marriage, Grace began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, she dismissed it as something she ate or the stress of the school year. But when the symptoms persisted, Nathan insisted she see the doctor in Central City. She returned from that appointment with tears streaming down her face, and Nathan felt his heart stop. "What is wrong?" he demanded, pulling her into his arms. "What did the doctor say?" "Nothing is wrong." Grace looked up at him with a tremulous smile. "Everything is right. Nathan, I am pregnant." The shock on his face must have been comical because Grace started to laugh through her tears. "I thought it was impossible. All those years with Thomas and nothing, I was certain it would never happen." But the doctor says I am about 3 months along. We are going to have a baby. Nathan crushed her against him, overwhelmed by a surge of emotion so powerful it left him shaking. A baby. We are having a baby. Are you happy? Grace asked, pulling back to see his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified and elated and grateful and completely unprepared, but yes, definitely happy. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1876, with Grace attended by the doctor and 2 midwives from town while Nathan paced downstairs, jumping at every sound. When he was finally allowed upstairs, he found Grace propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached with trembling hands and looked down at the small face, the tiny perfect features, the eyes that were trying to focus on this new strange world. He felt something in him that had been broken suddenly heal, like all the loss and loneliness of his life had been leading to this moment. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him James after Nathan's father and called him Jamie for short. Nathan discovered that he loved fatherhood with an intensity that surprised him. He would stand over Jamie's cradle for hours just watching him sleep, marveling at the miracle of this tiny person who was half him and half Grace. Grace proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even in the depths of sleep deprivation. When Jamie was 3 months old, Grace announced that she would not be returning to teaching in the fall. "I want to be here," she explained to Nathan. "I want to raise our son and help you build this ranch and teach in my own time. Maybe when he is older I can go back to formal teaching, but for now, this is where I need to be." Nathan supported her decision completely, though he made sure she knew the door was always open if she changed her mind. Together, they built a life that balanced the demands of the ranch, the joys of parenthood, and their own relationship. It was not always easy, but it was always worth it. When Jamie was 2, Grace gave birth to their daughter, Emma. When Emma was 3, their second son, Daniel, arrived. The ranch house that had once echoed with Nathan's loneliness now rang with the sounds of children laughing, crying, playing, and learning. Grace taught them their letters at the kitchen table, and Nathan taught them to ride as soon as they could walk. The Double I Ranch prospered. Nathan's breeding program produced horses that were sought after from Denver to San Francisco. Grace's business acumen helped them expand strategically, investing profits wisely and building relationships with buyers and other ranchers. They hired hands to help with the increased workload, and Nathan found that he enjoyed mentoring young men in the art of horse breeding. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan and Grace stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Nathan wrapped his arms around Grace from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You ever regret staying?" he asked. "Giving up Central City and your cousin and the plans you had?" Grace leaned back against him. "Never. Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this ranch, it is everything I never knew I needed. You gave me a second chance at happiness, Nathan. You gave me a home. You gave me the same thing. When you knocked on my door asking for supplies, you brought me back to life." Nathan turned her in his arms so they were face to face. "I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I loved you so much then I could barely breathe. I love you too. Thank you for being brave enough to ask me to stay. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, 2 people who had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. Behind them, their children's laughter rang out across the ranch, the sound of joy and continuity and everything that mattered. Years passed. The children grew. Jamie became an accomplished horseman like his father, eventually taking over much of the daily operations of the ranch. Emma surprised everyone by developing a passion for veterinary medicine, studying under the local doctor, and becoming one of the first women in Colorado to formally treat animals. Daniel inherited his mother's love of teaching and became the schoolmaster in Central City, where he was known for his patience and creativity. Nathan and Grace grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, always the center of a large and loving family. The ranch continued to prosper under Jamie's management, with Emma providing medical care for the horses and Daniel contributing by teaching the children of ranch hands during the summer months. On a warm evening in their 45th year of marriage, Nathan and Grace sat in rocking chairs on the porch, holding hands as they watched the sun set over land they had built a life on together. Nathan was 77 now, Grace 73, both of them showing the wear of long years but still vital and present. "Do you remember the first night you stayed here?" Nathan asked. "How frightened you were, how uncertain of everything." "I remember thinking you were either a saint or a fool to offer shelter to a strange woman," Grace said with a smile. "I had no idea you were simply a good man who recognized a fellow lonely soul. I was so worried you would leave after 2 weeks. I felt like I was living on borrowed time, trying to cram a lifetime of connection into 14 days. And here we are, 45 years later, still connected." Grace squeezed his hand. "I've had a good life with you, Nathan Irving, better than I ever imagined possible." "We are not done yet," Nathan protested. "We have more years ahead of us." "I know. But it is good to acknowledge what we have built. 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren so far, a ranch that will outlast us both, a love that has weathered every storm." Grace turned to look at him, her eyes still bright despite the years. "We did well, you and I. We did better than well. We did beautifully." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. 2 people who had found each other by chance and chosen each other by design, who had built a legacy not just in land and horses but in love and family, and all the small kindnesses that add up to a life well lived. Nathan thought back to that night 45 years ago when a knock on his door had changed everything. He had been so lonely then, so convinced that solitary existence was his fate. And then Grace had appeared, asking to buy supplies, and he had made the impulsive decision to give them freely and ask for her company instead. It was the best decision he had ever made, the one that had led to everything else: the marriage, the children, the laughter and tears and countless shared sunsets. "I would do it all again," he said suddenly. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge. I would do it all exactly the same way because it led to this, to us, to everything we have been blessed with." Grace raised his hand to her lips and kissed it gently. "So would I, my love. So would I." As night fell completely over the Double I Ranch, Nathan and Grace remained on the porch, hands joined, hearts aligned, 2 souls who had found their way home through each other. And if you had listened carefully in the darkness, you might have heard Grace humming softly, one of the songs she had taught their children, while Nathan's deep voice joined in for the chorus, their voices blending as seamlessly as their lives had blended all those years ago. The ranch lights glowed warm in the darkness, a beacon of home and family and enduring love, just as they had on that long-ago night when a woman knocked asking to buy supplies, and a lonely rancher offered her the world instead.